Well, they sent me proposed the idea, and I wasn't sure about it, only because, you think, what's the point of recreating something that's already been made? And I just think the only purpose of doing it is the fact that they're lost. There's no point in doing things that are available on DVD. So it is the fact that they're lost is the thing. It's the only opportunity that that the audience will have of seeing these scripts. Well, in the 60s, this is what I gather. I gather that everything used to be on film, and then there was a film archive, and then these videotapes came out. These were huge, chunky, great, expensive pieces of kit that Dad's Army was, and lots of other Steptoe and lots of other things were recorded on. They were kept by the BBC Engineering Department, and the BBC Engineering Department didn't have the same sense of heritage that the film archive people did. As far as they were concerned, these huge, great chunks of expensive kit were just expensive kit that could be used again, and they didn't have any sense of also television at the time was totally ephemeral. There was no channels nowadays. We got all these repeats coming at us all the time on these all various platforms, and in those days you would show the show once and you'd repeat it, and in order for them to repeat it again, they'd have to pay everybody again. So it was a big, expensive business to repeat a show on terrestrial television. And so, as far as people were concerned, it was an ephemeral thing. It's been on, and it's unlikely to be seen again. There were no DVDs, of course. There were no other ways of seeing these things unless they were going to be repeated. The chances of being repeated, as far as they were concerned, were minimal. So, therefore, they've got these expensive things. Let's make panorama over it, or whatever. And with no, so some of the episodes were put on film in order to be sent to other countries to be broadcast on their TV stations. And I think a lot of those episodes have been found in warehouses in those countries. And so in the attempt to try and find these lost episodes, I think about 150 of various different sorts of Steptoes and Hancocks and Dad's Armies. A lot of them have been recovered. But these three episodes of Dad's Army have long since rankled with a lot of Dad's Army fans, that they've never had the chance to see them, and now we do. Well, the show you might say is dated, but it was dated from day one. In 1968 or whenever it was it came out, it was set 20 years before, well, no, more than 20 years, 25 years before. So it's never been in date, as it were. So it's and the scripts are really well constructed. I mean, they are object lessons very often. A lot of the episodes, and they made about 80. A lot of the are object lessons in how to write a 28-minute farce in. A three-act farce in 28 minutes, and so a lot of them, the setup, the development, and the payoff really work. And these three are great. I mean, they're just great examples of their work. Well, in my opinion, when trying to work out whether it was worth doing or not, because you think, no, somebody else has done this really well. Why are we doing it? And it is a celebration of Croft and Perry writing with understudies, as I see it. I mean, we're never going to be as good as them. We're never going to be them. We can't, but this is the only opportunity to have this work filmed. And so let's relish it. Let's do it. I do. I have a very scratchy memory. I remember the black and white one. I do. I was really small, and I remember seeing them subsequently and working out the geography of the set. And I remember the vicar's office, and yeah, I do. I have this really scratchy black and white memory of seeing the early days. And then, of course, yes, it just became part of the national fabric, that show, along with a lot of Croft and Perry materials. But what one has to remember is that a lot of the Croft and Perry shows are really unlikely projects. With Dad's Army, no one really knew anything about the Home Guard, whatever the Defence Force, it was called LDV, I think it was called something like that. And no one really knew anything about that. And so to propose a show about the Home Guard was a really unlikely thing. And luckily David Croft was head of comedy at the BBC, so he could pitch the idea to himself and then decide whether it was a good idea or not. But a lot of their shows, Jimmy Perry, David Croft shows, set in a department store. You think, what's funny about that? Set in out in Burma. You think, what's funny about that? It was a very serious business. Set behind the lines in France. That was a serious business too. You know, what's funny about that? None of them are overtly funny premises for shows. and yet now they are sort of part of the comic fabric of our TV. Well, Wilson, I think I was given the nod for this show because I'd done him. I hadn't done Wilson. I'd done John Le Mesurier in a sort of biopic of Hattie Jacques and John Le Mesurier. We did that on BBC Two. Actually, we did BBC. Yeah, it came out on BBC Two eventually. And I wasn't consciously playing Wilson then. I was looking at the This Is Your Lives of John Le Mesurier. So I'd sort of played him. And in that one, it was about their private life, or their life, and their marriage. And when she took a lover, Le Mesurier didn't leave the house. He just moved upstairs to the spare room. It was, and Aidan Turner played the lover, and Ruth Jones was playing Hattie Jacques. So that was out, and that seemed to be popular, and people seemed to like it, and it went well. And maybe I got the nod to play Wilson in that. But I see them as different because you're playing Wilson, Le Mesurier in one, and I had to sort of look again at how Wilson was on the DVDs and things like that. So there is a difference between the actor and the character. People like to think there isn't any difference between the actors and character, but there obviously is. Well, they're really good. I mean, that was it is one of the great pleasures of it. I know one can be too sort of, hey, wonderful showbiz about it, but they are great. They're really good, and everybody's right for the parts they're playing. And the parts that Croft and Perry have written are that mix of character and caricature. They are caricatures, they are types, and yet there's real characters in there, characters that you really attach to, characters you enjoy. Characters are completely different from each other, and that's one of the rules, of course, of sitcom, is that you have a disparate group of people trapped in the same room, and then you're thrown together and say, how do you get on? That seems to be a rule that's applied to all the great sitcoms, and this is no different like that. Well, it is. I mean, you have to sort of pretend that it's yours. we are. You don't want the whole show to be in aspic. You don't want it to be a museum piece. You want it to live and breathe as an interaction between characters. So yeah, you have to be slavishly attentive to and respectful of the show that we're recreating. And yet you have to believe that these two characters are talking to each other, and they're responding to each other in that moment. Which it's a unique job in my experience of having to recreate and allow it to breathe, but also be attentive to what it is we're recreating. Well, it's really interesting putting it in front of a live audience. I mean, the thing is, each of the recordings we're going to have to persuade the audience that this project is worthwhile. Each of them will be fresh audiences. Although I think some of them are coming again. There are members of the Dad's Army Appreciation Society who I think are coming after all three of them. But we've got 300 people out there, and so we're just going to have to say, look, come on, this is the spirit in which we're making it. Try and come along with us on this one. And I noticed that after the recording, we do each scene twice. Ben Kellett likes to do that, so he can chop and change between takes, or maybe use the whole of one take. But that's a really useful thing with an audience as well. Because the audience, it takes time. It'll take the audience at home time to sort of accept what we're doing. But I mean, likewise in the studio, I felt it was quite quick actually. I mean, I reckon about halfway through the first take, I thought they went, oh yeah, I get it, yeah. I hope they felt that the show was in good hands, and then it took off. It was great, and people just accepted it for what it is. And in the spirit in which the show is being made as well. I would say surrender. No, surrender only in the sense that just don't fight it. It's here we are. We're giving you the opportunity to see these scripts, which were made by the greats. They made it, and for stupid technical reasons, they're no longer available. We're just giving the opportunity to say, here we are. This is what they did, and I have to say, just on a personal level, it's just fantastic for us as actors to have a chance to do Croft and Perry material long after they've gone, and to be able to say and have license to play it, because it's such good fun.